Question of Doubt. Commentary on the Arrest and Trial of John Wayne Gacy by John Wayne Gacy. John Gacy receives no compensation from the publication or sale of this book. First edition, 1993. Copyright, 1988-1993. John Wayne Gacy. All rights reserved, including the right of reproduction in whole or in part in any form. Produced independently by Mike Johnson and D.H. Naismith, with permission of J.W. Gacy, Myco Associates Ltd., Hannibal, Missouri. First printing. This book was written with the intent to show that there is always more than one side to a story. Whether that story is detailed over a backyard fence by neighbors in the form that is referred to as gossip, or if it is the slanted version of a war correspondent debasing the efforts of one country and hailing the valiant rightness of another, or if the story is the account of a trial in a courtroom of American justice. In the latter instance, the blur of the push and pull of counter-arguments of attorneys and the results of those arguments released to the public is too often only the collusive version of the police and the press. Much has been written about John Wayne Gacy, gregarious contractor and influential businessman, civic and community leader, politician, mass killer, news media monster. Yet not one of the authors of these articles and books has bothered to talk to John Wayne Gacy to ascertain what events took place during those critical 2 weeks prior to his arrest. Why and how it transpired that he was arrested on a drug charge, jailed and ultimately convicted of more murders than any person in the history of the United States. All that has been written since the initial surveillance on me, beginning on December 11th, 1978, has been drawn from the reports of the officers involved. A one-sided story. This is not an autobiography covering my entire life, but a detailed account of the nightmare I lived from December 11th, 1978 until March 13th, 1980. This is the history of the concoction of lies and calculated deceit created by the police and the news media. How both of these powers used me as a golden goose to satisfy their superiors and further their own professional ends. The goals of truth and justice were shamefully abandoned for the sake of ego and the sensational attention that my case provided them. Truth was ignored, or at best reshaped into half-truths. Half-truths were twisted into lies. Evidence favorable to me was discarded. The non-factual contrivances that these powers submitted to the public created the ghastly carnival atmosphere which surrounded the lengthy trial proceedings. This was done for the base purpose of embellishing their own anonymous lives via the center ring spotlight that they manipulated. The facts involving the deaths of 33 men and boys remain to be discovered, if indeed those facts are not too deeply buried. The overzealousness of the small community police who investigated me during the 10 days prior to my arrest allowed them assurance that I was their man. The only professional energy that they expended after that day was toward solidifying, with a non-professional fervor, the flimsy substance of a 10-day around-the-clock scrutiny of nearly my every move. Is this man, John Wayne Gacy, really the mass killer? Is the man behind bars, living each minute of each day in a squeezed cell in the death row unit of Illinois State Prison in Menard, Illinois? No prisoner appears as the normal conception of a man. That blandness is disallowed by the drab prison garb and is stripped further from a man when he is bejeweled with handcuffs, linked to a waist chain which runs down to connect to a set of leg irons, and to that an imperfect haircut. The bloodless skin of a person who, for health and safety reasons, has seen less sunshine in 10 years than the average postman sees in a single July day, and the grim expression of a man who, when arrested, was afflicted with psychomotor epilepsy, syncope, a heart condition, colitis, hypoglycemia, and who was informed later by prison doctors that he had contracted a form of multiple sclerosis. There you have the shell of John Wayne Gacy. A Pulitzer Prize winner would not find it an easy task to describe this man unless he wished to wax creative to appease the expectations of a reading public which has come to believe him to be a man of monstrous dissymmetry. And the police photograph reproduced in the newspapers. He is unshaven, his eyes are puffed, and he is wearing a squint and a half-hearted smile above the placard with his identification number on it. With that picture and its caption, "Mass Murderer," as a backdrop, the characterization built in the public mind was sinister. Looking further into the same newspaper, I noticed another photo of a man in an out-of-town baseball uniform, standing at home plate in a major league ballpark. I spotted the word "home run" during my short glance at the caption. I knew then that he was a professional ball player, until I settled on the underlying print which corrected my impression. He was, in fact, a businessman who had hit a home run for a charitable organization. Thus, I was reminded how milieu and implication can mislead in identification. John Wayne Gacy stands 5 feet 9 inches, a portly 210 pounds. His hair is dark, with a grayed rim and a salt and pepper full beard. His strong appearance is deceptive. He now has to drag his right foot along because of the degeneration of the nerves and muscles in that leg. The skin hangs loose on the bones from spending the greater portion of 10 years on the low cot in his cell, standing only for toilet reasons or to visit the prison doctor, whose office is within 100 feet of the cell. In the morning he may take a shower on any day except Sunday or a holiday. It is 25 feet from his cell. He does not appear atrophied, but he does not look healthy. His primary pleasures are a few cigars a day, his correspondence with a few dozen pen pals, and his oil painting which finances his other pleasures. He has bright eyes that are not whimsical, not bitter. His eyes are quick when he is talking about sports or his family, but the sullenness may return before you can blink. Common? Yes. He appears not definitely as a contractor or politician, nor as a community civic leader, nor a go-get-'em businessman. He is the guy who stands next to you at the supermart and nonchalantly asks, "Know where they keep the dog food?" He's the face that settled your check when you last ate at a restaurant. He's the same face that leans out of the street cleaning machine on your block. And yet, he is the man waiting to be strapped to a gurney with an IV of lethal injected drugs coursing through his system, who has never told his side of the story. This narrative will describe the numerous characters in a charade and the vital roles that each played. You will be escorted step by step from my first encounter with the Des Plaines police on December 12th, 1978, and the methods that were employed in hounding me every hour for the next 10 days. You will watch the arrest on a drug charge, the appearance before a judge on the 5th day, where I faced the first indictment. You are to meet my attorneys and hear the ensuing conversations, and you shall follow the testimony of witnesses and police and encounter the powerful prosecution attorneys. You can view for yourself the sly subtleties and the explosive language of the combatants for and against me, disclosure of the medical attention and lack of such, the destruction of my personal property, the maladministration of drugs by the jail's attendant doctors, the medical examiner's reports, the selection of a jury from out of town, interviews with psychiatrists, the effect of 101 witnesses, the evidence, the closing arguments, and finally, the verdict and the sentence. For reasons that do not matter, I have changed the names of several of the people involved. None of the words spoken during the time frame have been altered in this text. The quotes that I have cited are authentic. They may be found in the transcripts of the trial of the State of Illinois versus John Wayne Gacy, documents numbered 79-69 to 79-75, and 79-2378 to 79-2403. These are a matter of public record. Citations will be referenced to authors and/or publications. I have spent several years studying the thousands of pages of trial transcripts, the material that is germane to this writing. I have pored over the copies of public records and thoroughly reviewed my personal files so as to document accurately the information and the sources of that information. I have worked my way through the initial lapses of memory caused by alcohol and drug dependency, created by verified medical prescriptions, and the abuse of them and other drugs. These are the first words that John Gacy has spoken. This is my side of the story of the 34th victim. Prologue. The first tide of winter had begun her encroachment. The late fall of 1978 had been cold, and there was a leftover crust from the thick snow of the last storm. The climate was prematurely cold. Christmas was only 2 weeks away, and most people felt that this year they would wake to a white Christmas day. Norwood Park Township is an unincorporated area, a suburban fringe touching northwest Chicago, and is part of Cook County. It is a picturesque hamlet of well-kept homes in the $100,000 to $200,000 bracket. Norwood Park does not have the myriad problems that neighboring Chicago suffers. Drug abuse, rape, murder, robbery are not commonplace events, and when they do occur, they become a topic of concerned conversation. There is some small-time crime, and the citizens are not oblivious to its existence. But the alarm to carry a gun has never been sounded, and fear is not the status quo. It is a tranquil community of the professionally successful. Emerald green swards of lawn lie in neat geometric shapes, beautifying the approaches to the homes. Proud trees line most streets. It was at 8213 Summerdale, in one of the few houses with a circular driveway, that I lived with my mother. We had moved back here in 1971 just to get out of the city and to have a place of our own. At the time, I was contemplating going into business for myself and expected to need the extra space. Chicago had become a grubby city, and my mother did not feel safe there any longer. When we moved into the new home, I was working as chef and kitchen manager at Bruno's restaurant over in the west section of Chicago's famous Loop in the downtown district. It pleased me that the Chicago Blackhawk hockey team ate there and that I had developed a first-name relationship with most of the players. Often, at their request, I would whip up specially made dishes for them, items that were not on the menu. It followed that they would give me tickets to the home games as often as I wanted to go. But my goals were more ambitious than cooking and hockey games. For some reason, my goal had been a business of my own. I had been taking side jobs at wallpapering and painting in my free time, and was getting more than I could work into my schedule at Bruno's. In fact, my income from this freelance business, simply called PDM, for painting, decorating, and maintenance, had already surpassed my salary. So it was an easy decision to quit the restaurant and go full-time as a painting contractor. It was a struggle at the beginning. Bruno's words came back to me. "You're crazy. Chicago's got more contractors than customers already. You'll never make it out there. You'd better stay here with me." But success was my obsession. I was driven not by ambition, but by the memory of my father's scornful, belittling put-downs. "You stupid kid. You'll never amount to anything." Hard work and long hours were my answer to my father's jibes. I was a workaholic. My philosophy was that if a man was willing to sacrifice and work long hours with diligence and pride, there was no reason for the comfortable life to escape him. I had shown my father, before he died, that I could be a success, and I wished that he were alive now, so I could show him again. 16 to 18-hour days were the rule now, and I needed help to complete the jobs that I contracted. I hired younger, less experienced men to help, taught them the working end of the business and the rewards of honest labor. I impressed upon them the importance of establishing personal goals. My only requirements were a willingness to learn, courtesy to the customers, and sincerity about doing the job. I wanted to give them a confidence that my father had denied me. The business expanded from merely decorating into a small firm that specialized in all forms of home remodeling. Things were going very well. My customers were always pleased with the completed projects. In fact, almost all my work was garnered through referrals. I never advertised. There were no contracts. A handshake was sufficient. I made it a practice to be on the work site the final day to be certain that there was customer approval. No final payment was requested until the customer was satisfied. In 1975, after remodeling some business buildings and the stores of two of Chicago's largest ice cream emporiums, I moved up to larger, more creative work. The remodeling for PE Systems, a firm specializing in pharmacy design and construction and in pharmaceutical marketing. Although these were generally larger jobs than any in my experience, I picked it up quickly and soon became the vice president in charge of construction. In 3 years, I traveled over 150,000 miles for PE Systems. United Airlines gave me their red carpet plaque for traveling over 25,000 miles a year. When the Democratic committeemen were called upon for help by the Polish National Alliance, they came to me. Because of my pride in my Polish heritage, I was pleased to organize what turned out to be the largest Polish parade in Chicago's history. I returned to help with that event for the next 3 years. Then, with that experience, became the advisor to other ethnic parades for the city. In 1978, I assisted the Secret Service in working out the details for the appearance of Rosalind Carter at the Polish parade and reception. So often, there are negative consequences of success. My marriage of 3 years disintegrated because of the little time I devoted to it. The wife that I adored left, taking our 2 daughters, and I was heartbroken. I turned to drinking for late-hour companionship and to forget my loss. My nerves were getting shaky. Often I wasn't able to get to sleep when I did get to bed. I turned to prescription drugs to relax me for sleep, and others that would perk me up in the morning and provide an artificial energy for the day's work. Not knowing the harmful effects of Valium, I kept increasing its use as my workload increased. Instead of slowing down, I accelerated my pace. Becoming a Democratic precinct captain led to the position of secretary-treasurer of the Cook County Board for the township. Volunteering my services to the street commission, I helped with the snow plowing of the streets, street repair, and planting of trees on the city's grounds. I joined the Loyal Order of Moose and became a member of their clown club. As a clown, I visited hospitals twice a month, appearing in suburban parades, and enjoyed the delight of preschool children and the elderly in nursing homes. But my work was still my obsession. My compulsive nature wore away at me. More edgy now, I increased my intake both of Valium and, necessarily, the source of pharmaceutical energy in the form of Placidil and Preludin. I alternately raced and sagged with this roller coaster formula. In September of 1978, I left PE Systems and went into competition with them. Now, much of my work was subcontracted to my own PDM corporation, my baby firm and starting point. On the cold afternoon of December 11th, my Uncle Harold, whom I cared for very much, was in serious condition at Northwest Hospital in Chicago. The doctors told me that he had little chance of lasting through the night. I was emotionally numb. At 4:30 that afternoon, instead of staying with my beloved uncle, I left the hospital to check on some work that my crew had finished at a drugstore just 15 minutes away. After finishing the inspection at 5, I went to the Nissan pharmacy in Des Plaines, a store whose remodeling I had completed 2 years before, to discuss further work for the owner. That project was not one I cared to do or could afford to handle, since the man was a bad credit risk. But out of courtesy, I gave him an estimate. I returned to my office to check the mail in the answering machine. I looked for my appointment book because it contained my schedule for the rest of the evening and decided that I must have left it at Nissan's. When I went back to get it, the owner wanted to discuss the job proposition again because he thought he had found a way to cut some costs. At 8:45, I again returned to the office and cleared and reset the answering machine. One of the messages was from the family, asking me to go at once to the hospital. Uncle Harold was failing fast. I wondered what time the message had come in. I was in bad shape now and needed a nap, but it was out of the question. I was finally able to get back to the hospital at 11, and I went directly to Uncle Harold's room. Empty. I rushed to the nurse's station and was told that he had died an hour before. Irony. Habitually business motivated, I wasted on a customer I didn't want the final hours of the uncle who meant so much to me. I left the hospital for the family home with the image of Uncle Harold's room fresh in my mind. The empty bed ready for the next patient, the chemical odor, the tracelessness of his ever having been there. How swift and random is death. His house in Norwich was dark when I arrived. I didn't bother to ring the bell, but went next door where my cousin lived. I tried to console my aunt and had a bite to eat and a couple of stiff bracers. After an hour or so, the necessary talk about funeral arrangements had added to the family fatigue and the long day. Tired and sad, I waited until next morning to call my sister, so that she could tell our mother that Harold was gone forever. Mom had a bad heart, so I reminded my sister to make the grievous words as soft as possible. That morning I sat in my office wishing that the death had not happened until after the holidays. It would put a damper on the forthcoming plans for the family. Christmas had been a bad time for me since 1969, when my father died on Christmas Day. I wondered if he had suffered pain at the end, or had departed peacefully. Going to the kitchen, I took my morning Valiums, 30 milligrams. This would be repeated 3 or 4 times during the day. I had built up an immunity over the years, and it was common to take 130 milligrams a day. If I got too relaxed, I would need 75 milligrams of Placidil or Prologue to get through the day. I cleared and reset the answering machine and sighed. Little did I know how I would remember this time. Not so much for the death of Uncle Harold, but that this night my life would be turned into an unending, unbelievable nightmare.